Hello, I'm Munenori Miyamoto, Divisional Manager of Myanmar Green Challenge Promotion Office. Now I explain the Myanmar Green Challenge 2050. Myanmar Green Challenge 2050 aims to ensure that Myanmar continues to be a company that contributes to the realization of a sustainable future. The Myanmar Group will take on 3 challenges. The first is to realize corporate activities with zero greenhouse gas emissions. The second is to realize environmental load-free corporate activities based on circulating resources. The third is to support our customers to become GHG negative and resource recycling. This slide shows the overview of Myanmar Green Challenge 2050. I explain in detail the following slides. Under Challenge 1, we tackle to reduce GHG emissions from our business activities. Approximately 90% of the group's emissions come from the products sold. In the Scope 3, we will make our products carbon neutral by 2050 by developing hydrogen, biofuel engines, fuel cell systems, electric powertrains, and new powertrains that can run on various types of green energy. In Scope 1 and 2, the goal is to achieve carbon neutrality in business management by 2030. In Challenge 2, we will address 4 themes. Theme 1, waste reduction and recycling. We will minimize resource use in our corporate activities and make all used resources recyclable by 2040. In Theme 2, improvement of product recycling rate. We will make all our products on sale recyclable by 2050. Under Theme 3, reduction of water consumption. We will minimize water consumption by 2040. In Theme 4, reduction of use and emission of environmentally hazardous substances. We set our own standards for environmentally hazardous substances, which are stricter than global standards. At the same time, we will develop and promote the technologies to reduce the use and emission of those substances by 2030. In Challenge 3 is an aggressive GHG emission reduction activity to commercialize new solutions to convert our customers' business activities to GHG negative and resource recycling activities, as well as our own. For example, in the energy conversion field, in addition to the energy management system we already provide, we will provide solutions that minimize losses during energy conversion and use in customers' businesses, such as converting waste heat into usable electricity. In the area of food production, we will provide solutions for minimizing the use of fertilizers and pesticides, as well as solutions for reusing food waste generated along the food production as production materials and energy. As I explained, Myanmar Green Challenge 2050, since it is an initiative that includes the supply chain, we have newly established the basic procurement policy and supplier code of conduct. In addition to them, we have revised green procurement guidelines. This is the structure of Myanmar procurement policy. Basic procurement policy shows our initiative in procurement. Supplier code of conduct describes what we expected from our business partners based on the basic procurement policy. And the Green Procurement Guideline describes our request to our business partners regarding environmentally hazardous substances. The basic procurement policy consists of 4 components. The point is the first one. We promote environmental conversion. We promote environmental conservation as a social responsibility and promote green procurement. Supply chain code of conduct describe 11 codes that Yama Group expects our business partners based on the basic procurement guidelines. The point is number 4, environmental preservation. We ask our suppliers to strictly manage environmentally hazardous substances. The Green Procurement Guideline specifies the criteria for selecting business partners and procured items. It also describes the requirements for compliance with regulations on the use of environmentally hazardous substances. From January 2023 this year, the scope of application has been expanded to cover all procurement activities. Here is a table summarizing revised contents of the Green Procurement Guidelines. The scope of application has been expanded to include all business activities. And new requirements have been added for the reduction of GHGs and environmentally hazardous substances. For details, please refer to our website. This is a final topic from me. This is a request regarding Myanmar's Scope 3 Category 1 calculation method. This is how we currently have calculated our Scope 3 Category 1 and how we would like to be in the future. Since the GHG emission factors in the database are fixed values, no matter how much effort companies make, the numbers will not decrease. In order to reduce GHG emissions in such a situation, the purchase price itself must be reduced. The original purpose cannot be achieved by either reducing the purchase amount or buying at a low price. Since the emission factor should change during the production processes, we should have suppliers provide us with their calculated GHG emissions. Therefore, starting this year, we would like to conduct a survey on our business partners. We will explain the survey items and how to respond at the end of this webinar. Thank you in advance for your understanding. That's all for my presentation explanation. Thank you very much.
Okay. Now I would like to invite Mr. Fan from Zero Board, the specialist of GHG management.
Hello, everyone. Let me take a moment to share my screen. I hope that everything is fine, right? Okay, so again, hello everyone. My name is Hui. I'm from the Customer Success Department of Zero Board, and today I will be giving a presentation about the introduction for calculating greenhouse gas emissions. It's going to be a very general overview of the topic, since the time constraint will let me get into details. But I do hope that you may find some informative out of the talk. So questions will be received at the Q&A function, and so please type in if you have any inquiries. Okay. So first of all, I would like to briefly introduce our company, Zero Board. So we are a very young team of over 160 members, heading to our second anniversary next month. And we develop and provide a cloud service named Zero Board, which calculates and visualize the greenhouse gas emissions from, and based on what results, we also provide the consulting services for the decarbonization. So our product is reliable as it's been verified to follow ISO standards. And within our 2 years of growing and thriving, we have attracted over 2,400 companies of all size to use our platforms. And one of the features that drive our competitiveness is the linkage between suppliers. So our product has the ability to acquire and to link the primary data from suppliers, supporting data collection and contributing to a rapidly growing ecosystem of GHG emissions reporting. So in addition to our main products as Zero Board, we also have specialized products for individual industries such as Zero Board Logistics and Zero Board Construction. And we also have a community called All the Board. With all of these approaches, we aim to transform the climate change into social possibilities. Okay, so now let's move on to the overview of supply chain emissions. So I think first it's essential to have an insight on the background, like what caused the paradigm shift in the business environment, and like why is everybody starting to talk about decarbonization and net zero out of the sudden. So we believe that there are 3 of the driving factors that will be presented here. So first is the rising trend of the eco-friendly and sustainable consumption behavior. So millennials and Gen Z are becoming the majority of the consumer population. So they are reported to prefer environmentally friendly and sustainable products. Second, the market has become well aware of the significant financial impacts of climate change on most industry, while considering both risks and opportunities. Therefore, the disclosure of climate-related financial information, including CO2 emissions, has become the norm, and it has been encouraged by several of the international standards and guidelines. And third, at national and international level, the government has committing to a future of net zero. And in Japan, we know that the previous administration had made implementing a green society as a key policy and has committed to carbon neutrality by 2050. So considering all of these influences from the consumers, demands from the financial markets, as well as the pressures from the government, this is a huge risk for companies to not engage in the decarbonization. So at this point, I believe that it's safe to say that the earlier you get on board and start your journey to decarbonize, the better it is. But then where to start? So one of the first steps is to start account and grasp your company's current situation of the greenhouse gas emissions. So this is when it becomes essential to understand the greenhouse gas protocol, or GHG protocol. So the protocol is an initiative and created as an international standard for companies and corporations to account and report emissions. And it categorizes greenhouse gas into scope 1, scope 2, and scope 3. So at this slide, I will explain a little bit more about the GHG protocol. So as mentioned earlier, there are scope 1, 2, and 3 in the protocol. So please take a look at the center of the figure here. So scope 1 at the center of the figure refers to the direct emissions from the sources that are owned or controlled by your company. So this will include the emissions from the on-site fuel combustions, like industrial process, or even mobile combustion, such as vehicles or transportation. And then we have the scope 2 emissions. Scope 2 of the GHG will covers indirect greenhouse gas emissions associated with the consumption of purchased electricity, heat, steam by the reporting company, which is your company. In this example. So despite the emission is produced outside of the reporting company, scope 2 is also considered as in-house because so such energy is consumed during your company's operation. And then we have the upstream and downstream, which all belongs to scope 3. So scope 3 goes beyond the direct indirect emissions covering scope 1 and 2, and it consists of all other indirect emissions that occur in the value chain of your company. And there are 15 categories in total, and they are addressed here. So okay, so one thing that I'd like to point out is that while scope 1 and scope 2 emissions will differ and be independent by each reporting company, there is an overlap in scope 3. So if you are a B2B business, then your scope 1 and 2 will be accounted as your client's scope 3. And similarly, your supplier scope 1 and 2 will be accounted as your scope 3. So in fact, I think Yama also addresses earlier that the majority of the emissions from companies is usually originate from the scope 3. Therefore, this intentional overlap suggests a shared responsibility as well as the efforts required to reduce greenhouse gas emissions within the supply chain. So in their efforts to pursue the green challenge, this time Yanmar expects your cooperation on gathering data for scope 1, scope 2, and scope 3, consisting of 4 different categories, naming here. So each scope and each category will be explained later. Okay, so now we have a general idea about the greenhouse gas protocol and also accounting the importance of accounting GHG emissions. I will explain how to calculate such emissions. So the basic formula to calculate is written here, and it's pretty simple in my opinion. We can say that the greenhouse gas emissions is equals to the activity data multiplied by the emission factors. So activity data, what are those? So the activity data can be either quantitative measure of each activity, for example, the amount of electricity usage or the weight of the coal consumption, or like, for example, the amount of materials input that you purchase for your companies. And also activity data can be accounting data, such as expenses, like how much money that you paid for your electricity, or the expenses for the waste treatment, or the payment for transportation, etc. So each of these activity data will be multiplied by its corresponding emission factors. As can be seen here, for example, amount of electricity usage will be paired with the GHG emission per 1 kilowatt hour of electricity use, and etc. So you may now have realized that actually the for the activity data, maybe some of you have already been keeping track of several of these. But however, for the emission data is another problem. It might not be very familiar. So the best source for this emission factor is from your suppliers who have calculated and they own their own primary data for the emission factors. And another source for these emission factors are from government statistics or the published databases, and they are called the secondary data. While the secondary data may be easier to acquire because you can subscribe, but you can purchase the license to access to some published databases. Using these secondary data tend to unable to reflect the supplier's efforts to reduce CO2 emissions. So based on the basic formula introduced in the previous slides, there are several methodologies to calculate emissions, and two of them will be present here. So the first one is the spend-based method, and the second one is the physical-based method. The spend-based method requires a value of your purchased goods and service, and it should be sorted by the product type and using the market values. So in other words, it is based on your expenses multiplied by the emission factors per unit of economic value. So this methodology is considered easy, but it has low on accuracy due to the influence of external factors such as like the fluctuation of prices. And the second methodology introduced here is the physical-based method. And we should use the activity data such as the fuel usage by fuel type, like the quantity of the items that you purchase, or the weight and the distance in order to calculate category 4, for example. And while it's like a little bit more complex to identify the data for each of these activity, this methodology provides higher accuracy as your company activities will be directly reflected in your calculation. And I think this is what Yama has been trying to pursue from this year on. So next I will explain more about each scope, starting from scope 1. So as mentioned earlier, scope 1 accounts for the direct emissions from business activities owned or controlled by your company. So it will cover 7 types of greenhouse gases, and it consists of calculating for the following activities. Like the first one is stationary combustion. So stationary combustion refers to the emissions from generation of electricity or heat or steam within your company. So the emissions are like maybe it will be directly related to your the operation of your boilers or your turbines or your furnaces. So second, the transportation combustion. So transportation can be like the materials or the products that you have produced. And it is worthy to note here that this emission must come from your company owned or controlled mobile combustion sources. Like, for example, you own your own trucks, your cars, or ships or airplanes. So if you use transportation services, saying, for example, you pay another company to deliver your materials or your products, then the emission from these activities will not be counted in scope 1, but will be counted in category 4 of scope 3. I will explain it a little bit later. And the other activities to be accounted for in scope 1 is the process emissions, agriculture industry, or industry processes, or the emissions from the waste incinerations, etc. Okay. So moving on, we have scope 2, and we also have like a little illustration here. So scope 2 refer to the emissions from the generation of purchased electricity, steam, heat, and cooling that is consumed by your company. So please note that if your company own your own power plants, like you have generate electricity by yourself, and you may use it by yourself, or you sell it to the system, the amount from these power plants, self-generated power plant, would not be counted in scope 2, as the generation of the electricity require the fuels consumption, and such consumption has already been accounted for in scope 1. Okay. So now we will look back on how to calculate the emissions from scope 1 and scope 2. As explained earlier, we can apply the basic principles using the activity data and the emission factors. So regarding the emission factors for scope 1, I think when you answer the question as from Yanmar using our system, we have already set the value as requested by Yanmar. So you probably do not have to worry about this. But for the emission of scope 2, I suppose that probably Ms. Yamazaki will provide you with more details later. And okay, so moving on, we have scope 3, and I will introduce about the 4 categories that Yanmar expects the questionnaires to be answered. So first one is category 1, the purchased goods and service. So category 1 will include emissions from the extraction, the production, and the transportation of the purchased goods and services that your companies have used. So for example, your company will purchase like raw materials from suppliers located in different parts of the world. Then the emissions associated with extracting those raw materials, or like the manufacturing of such materials and transporting them within the suppliers, could be considered as scope 1 category, scope 3 category 1, sorry. However, another thing that I had to emphasize is that if the transportation from the primary suppliers to your company falls under category 4, if you are paying for the transportation services, so in case that you own your own vehicles, so and you use it to transport, it will be count in scope 1 as explained earlier. So yes, please pay attention to this point. The next category is category 3, the fuel and energy emissions from the fuel energy related activities, which has not been included in scope 1 or scope 2. So yes, so like again, it's about fuel and energy, and I know that it can be very confusing to scope 1 and scope 2, but you probably can consider is the logic behind the category 3 is similar to category 1. So again, in category 1, it refers to the upstream emissions from your purchased goods or materials for your operations. Then the purchased goods here in category 3 are the fossil fuels, or like the energy or electricity that you bought. Like yes, so you need to account the electricity upstream emissions or the fossil fuels upstream emissions. For example, how much greenhouse gas did the extracting or processing activities of your fossil fuels had emit, or like the emissions from the generation of electricity that are lost during the transmission and distribution system. So it can be confusing, but basically you can, like after sorting out the target fuels and energy as scope 1 and 2, you might apply the different emissions factor to calculate category 3. Okay, so the next one is category 4, transportation and delivery. I've been repeating about this one so far for several times, but okay, here we go again. So category 4 is specifically covers the emission associated with transportation of products and goods that are purchased or sold by your company. So in other words, the category 4 consists of the emissions generated from transporting like the raw materials or components or even your finished products between your company's facilities to the external suppliers. So please note that it includes emission from transporting of your sold products as well, even that this is like the upstream emissions. So in order to determine which transportation activities belong to category 4, I think it is important to answer 2 questions. The first one is, do you own the vehicles that used to transport? So if you do, then it will be count as your scope 1 or scope 2. Then the second question is that who pays for the transportation fees? And if you pay for the transportation fees, then it will be count as your category 4. And if your products transportation is arranged or paid by your buyers or your clients, emission will, from such transportation activities will belong to category 9 as presented here. Okay, so finally we have the category 5, which is the waste generated in emissions from the waste generated in operations. Okay, so as one can imagine, like there are several pathways for the final destination of the waste. So category 5 especially accounts for the flow of disposal of waste emitted from the reporting company, like mentioned here. So if your waste go to incineration or landfill or to be destined to final treatment by other companies, you can apply the formula, the basic formula, like using the waste amount and multiply by the corresponding emission factors to calculate your category 5. But if you incinerate your old waste, or you have other treatment, like you landfill your waste within your companies at your sites, then it will be the energy used for such activities will be accounted in scope 1. And one thing that should be noted is that if you sell your waste to another company, for example, if for the purpose of recover precious metal, for example, then the sold waste will not be counted in the category 5. Okay. So that was all of my explanation for scope 1, scope 2, category 1, 3, 4, 5 in scope 3. And these are the targets of YARMA questionnaires that will be shared with you via our system. And details for the questionnaire will be shared later. And in the end, I just want to note that even though that it looks like a lot of efforts are required to just fill in the emissions questionnaire, I believe that knowing your organization status of carbon emissions is very important if you don't want to miss out like the mega trend of decarbonization or net zero. So you can always start with like an easier methodology, like the spend-based method using your expenses, and starting with like secondary data emissions factors to calculate the your carbon emissions as the very first step. Or you can also make use of our system, ZeroBoard. Okay, thank you very much for your listening. If you have any question, then I would be very happy to answer.
Thank you very much, Mr. Fei. And I don't see any questions in the Q&A features. So if the participants in this webinar, if you don't have any questions, then we will like to move on to the next agenda. Thank you very much, Mr. Pei.
Thank you very much.
Hey, now we will have Ichikawa-san, Mr. Ichikawa from Procurement Division.
Thank you, Yamazaki-san. And I'm Tomoya Ichikawa, working in Global Procurement Strategy Department in Procurement Division. And first of all, thank you very much for your participation in today's webinar. As you heard today, we YAMA also have started to challenge for environmentally friendly. Of course, our product own, we are trying to reduce emissions. But to achieve our target, YAMA Green Challenge 2050, today's webinar's contents, we need today's attendees, our business partners' support. We really appreciate your kind understanding and support. And thank you again. And that's my comment. And thank you. And I will give back to Yamazaki-san again. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, now lastly, I would like to explain the contents of survey that we will conduct this year and the contents and how to answer the survey. Okay, then let me share the material with you. Okay. Okay, so this is the overview of the GHG emissions survey we will conduct this year. The survey period will be August to end of September. And we already received some comments that the period is not long enough to answer the survey. So when you receive the survey and if you think that you cannot finish answering the survey, please contact us. Then we may be able to extend the period. Okay, so the form of request is the survey we deliver to you by email, and the sender and mail title is something written in the screen. Then survey item is the emission amount in scope 1 and 2, and in scope 3, category 1, 3, 4, 5, as Mr. Fei explained today. And any inquiries regarding the survey, please contact me, Maiko Yamasaki, or Yuko Masaki of Yama Holdings, Yama Green Challenge Promotion Office. Okay, so the step 1, the email, as I mentioned, email will be delivered to you, and the emails is just look like this. And there are, yes.
画面が変わってないです。
I hope it's changed screen.
そうずっとタイトルのとこです。
It's okay now? 今変わりました？
いや、変わってないですね。
Okay. Sorry, there's some network problems and my screen is not changing. So I will share the material again. Let's try it again. Okay, is it the step 1 showing in my screen? Step 1映ってますか？
映ってないです。
Oh,
Sorry, Yamazaki-san. I think you are sharing a different screen from like you're sharing the original PowerPoint files, not the screen, not the presentation skill.
okay, so if we stayed in the original like PowerPoint, then is it Meta?
Yes.
Okay, so please allow me to explain in this form. Okay, then the email is just look like this, and there is a questionnaire. There should be the URL to lead you to the questionnaire. So click this URL, then you can move to the screen that just Mr. Fei showed us in his last presentations. Okay, and then step 2 is select the units for allocation for Yammer and input the values. So we would like you to choose whatever units that can be used for allocations of your GHG emissions to Yammer. So the units should maybe sales or weight in units. So whatever is suitable for your business. Then please enter the total amount of whatever units you choose and input the the volume for Myanmar. So that the allocation should be automatically calculated here. Okay, then after setting out the allocations, then you move on to scope 1, input each energy usage. So we already input the emission factor, so that the only thing that you need is to input the amount of energy you are using. So we listed up all the possible energy sources that you may use for scope 1. So enter the amount you use. So whatever energy source that you're using. So if you use some amount for city gas, then input the input the amount you use here. Then since we already input the emission factor, the emission amount and also the reportable emissions already calculated. But those the energy sources that you're not using, just enter 0, then ignore it. Okay, this is how to input the data for scope 1. And the second step is the scope 2. Since Mr. Fay explained, an emission factor for electricity is really varied from area to area, even within the company, in the country. So it's really good that if you can ask your electricity provider about the emission factor. This is so once you found out the emission factor for your electricity you use, then click add activity, then create the space to enter the scope 2 data. So choose select scope 2 and input electricity and input the amount of use of electricity. So to input the units, which is kilowatt per hour, then the CO2 here, and then input the emission factor you obtained from your electricity provider. And if you have several factories across the world or across the area, and then you know the emission factor is different, then you can click here to create more space to enter the different amount of use for scope 2 and also the electricity emission factor. So you can create how many you can create the area that you can input the data as much as you can. Okay. For the scope 3, because we cannot really set the emission factor ready for you, so please enter the GHG emission calculated in your company. Sorry, it's missing the scope category 3, but enter the scope 3 category 1, 3, 4, 5. So the GHG emission calculated in your company. Then we set the emission factor as 1, so that the data you input is reflected here as it is. Then use the location ratio that you set in step 2, so that the allocation for Myanmar is already automatically calculated. Okay, so that's the end of the data input for scope 1, 2, 3. Then if you like to add something or extra explanation should be made, so please write down anything you have. Then after input all necessary information, click confirm contents and answer. Then you completed the answering the survey. So this is all we would like to ask you for this year. So if you have any questions, please contact us anytime. Then, as Mr. Fay said, that please start with the calculations with the data already available to you. So that's probably the amount to pay. The spend-based method will be easiest one. So it will be a great idea to start with that easier one. Okay. Okay, thank you very much for joining us for today's webinar. And after leaving the webinar, we would like you to answer the questionnaire showing up on your screen. Okay, again, today's materials should be shared in short. And also recording file should be shared later. So thank you very much. And we appreciate your continued cooperation. Thank you for today and have a good evening.